Let's take a chessboard as our starting point. From everything we know so far in the story, there are 9 Holy Knights. That number changed when Figurlin Garling was promoted and became one of the Gorosei. It has always been implied that the leader of the Holy Knights stood above the rest in strength. This leader was portrayed as being close to, or perhaps even on the same level as, a Gorosei. If we treat this group as pieces on a chessboard, here's how the structure begins to form in front of us. We start with the pawns. The 8 Holy Knights represent those pawns. Behind them, we have the stronger pieces. The 5 Gorosei together with Figurlin Garling make up 6 powerful figures. 2 rooks, 2 bishops, and 2 knights. Even in chess itself, pawns have the ability to evolve into stronger pieces once they cross the board. That idea matches perfectly with what we see here. A Holy Knight, starting out as a pawn, has the potential to rise and become something greater. This is exactly what happened after Saturn's death. With his fall, Shamrock, the current leader of the Holy Knights, rose to the position of a stronger piece. The structure shifted. Now there are only 7 pawns left. Interestingly, immediately after Saturn's death, the Holy Knights approached Loki and asked him to join them. On one hand, this makes sense because Loki is known to be extremely strong, but on the other hand, it also shows that the Holy Knights needed to replace their missing pawn. They need to keep the number of pawns consistent. Of course, Loki refused the offer, but I'm sure that after his refusal, the Knights will eventually find someone else to fill that role. There are still 2 chess pieces missing from this board: the King and the Queen. This is where IMU comes in. We don't yet know whether IMU is male or female, but simply looking at IMU's design, the resemblance to a queen chess piece is hard to ignore. The queen, after all, is the most versatile and dangerous piece on the board. Still, this leaves us with a question. If IMU is the queen, then who is the king? We can also flip the situation. Let's imagine for a moment that IMU is not the queen, but a man who represents the king. In that case, who would be the queen? The strongest, most decisive piece of the world government structure. First, I want to explain how chess and other board games have always been tied to one piece, and then I will explain why defeating IMU is not enough to defeat the world government and its demonic power. Chess and board games are not something new. They are a theme that has existed since the beginning of the series and has only grown stronger with each arc. Take for example one of the more recent color spreads. In that illustration, Robin is seen playing chess, and the chess pieces are represented by the Straw Hats themselves. Oda often foreshadows stuff in his color spreads, and I believe this was another such case for the final saga. The Egghead arc also felt like a chess game in motion. If you think about it, we didn't get massive battles there. Instead, we saw smaller clashes and calculated moves like pieces being shifted around the board. Every step in that arc was more about strategy than raw power. There were also direct hints for that. In chapter 1102, after Kuma arrived at Egghead Island, Kizaru remarked that there were too many players on the board. I don't think that line was random, and this is not the first time such imagery has been used in One Piece. In past arcs, we also heard the phrase checkered fate. When I looked deeper into it, I found strong connections between IMU, the mysterious will of D, and games like chess that are played on a checkered board. The checkered pattern itself has powerful meaning. It represents chessboards. It represents the checkered flag. It symbolizes duality, black versus white, light versus darkness. That perfectly mirrors the 2 major Ds in the story, Blackbeard and Luffy. The 2 stand in opposition, like black and white on the board. The checkered fate has often been tied to the Ds. Recently, the Gorosei even suggested that Sabo might possess it. Stussy, in her own way, questioned whether she, a clone, had it, or if Kuma, a man stripped of all will, might hold it instead. Chess is not the only game that has shown up in One Piece. Another important example is the game of Go. During the war at Onigashima, CP0 used a Go board to explain the ongoing battles, showing which sides were fighting and how the balance shifted. Go also appeared in the live-action series where Garp used it as a teaching tool for Kobe. Clearly such games hold a connection to the world government as well. The idea of games has long been linked with godlike characters in the series. In Skypiea, NL constantly treated everything as a game. He even created the survival game where only 5 people out of 81 would remain standing. And Dressrosa, Doflamingo, a celestial dragon, created the birdcage game and forced everyone into his entertainment. So games are a recurring theme, and I believe this chess structure we are seeing now is not just a personal game that IMU is playing, it is the very structure of the world government itself. We can see similar game-based structures in other organizations. Take Baroque Works for example. It was led by Mr. Zero, aka Crocodile, and his partner Miss All Sunday, also known as Nico Robin. Beneath them were officer agents numbered all the way up to 12, and below those were the millions and billions of ordinary subordinates. The Beast Pirates are an even clearer example. Their ranks were based on a card theme. We saw King, Queen, and Jack as the commanders. Below them were the numbered subordinates, and Doflamingo himself was known as the Joker. But the world government is something else. Unlike the Beast Pirates who were built around playing cards, the world government is organized like a game of chess. And Imu is not just another player. Imu is the one controlling the board. She will sacrifice everything if necessary, whether to protect her king or, if she is the king herself, to protect her own existence. I am leaving this possibility open because my main focus is still the chess structure of the world government. However, I strongly believe that Imu is the strongest piece in this system. She is the one protecting the king, the piece that we have not seen yet. Let's take a closer look at Imu for a moment. To me, she gives off Big Mom vibes. She's extremely strong and powerful. At times, she is calm and serious, but it's easy to provoke her emotionally. That emotional vulnerability seems to be her main weakness. Even after 800 years, she's still affected by the influence of Joy Boy, Nefertari Lily, and the Will of D in general. We've already seen hints of this in the story. Imu's facial expressions change when she senses Joy Boy's haki or when Cobra mentions the D. She also gazes at the enormous portrait of Nefertari D. Lily with what looks like nostalgia. Even someone with immense power carries memories and emotions from the past, and this seems to affect her deeply. We also know that Imu is immortal, and that the Gorosei are immortal as well. It appears that they share a particular power, and Imu has the ability to remove or suppress this power from the Gorosei. A perfect example of this is seen during Saturn's death. Saturn, who was previously immortal, suddenly lost his immortality, leaving only his skeleton behind. However, I do not believe that Imu owns this power herself. Instead, I think the king is the one providing these demonic abilities. While the Holy Knights and Gorosei display devil-like symbols, the king is the true devil, the ultimate source of power. I believe there are three possible options for the identity of this king. First, the king could be a person. This individual may be hiding in the shadows or perhaps frozen in time, similar to the giant straw hat, in order to preserve this power for a very long period. Second, the king could be the national treasure of Mary Geoise mentioned by Doflamingo. He also stated that the power of this treasure is slowly decreasing over time. Third, the king could be the mysterious object depicted in the One Piece mural. We're not certain whether it's the Mother Flame or another form of power entirely, but I'm convinced that this object might represent the true source of the king's strength. This concept mirrors chess in some interesting ways. The king in chess appears to be the weakest piece. He cannot move far or do much on his own, but if the king is captured, the game is immediately lost. Meanwhile, the queen, the strongest piece on the board, does not determine the end of the game on her own. If the queen falls, the game continues, though the chances of victory are significantly reduced. The same principle seems to apply in One Piece. Imu, the queen, is the strongest character, but even if she's defeated, the true power source, the king, still exists. The game is not over until the king is defeated or removed. However, unlike chess, defeating Imu is nearly impossible. She's ruled over the world for more than 800 years, and some theories suggest that she may have even existed up to 3,000 years. It would be absurd for a 21-year-old boy, even with his friends, to take down such a legendary figure purely through brute force. Instead, if the Alliance discovers a way to destroy the king, the ultimate power source, then Imu would also be defeated. I think this scenario makes more sense for storytelling. It also preserves the dramatic tension. A direct one-on-one fight between Luffy and Imu until the death would be underwhelming, and I will explain why. By keeping the king as the hidden source of power, Oda can set up a larger and more satisfying climax. There are already two major conflicts planned for the final saga. One will be Luffy versus Blackbeard, and the other one will be a war between the alliance of pirates, giants, and the Revolutionary Army against the world government. We can call this the final war. In this final war, we will witness countless clashes and battles. However, Luffy will not be facing the main opponent there. The confrontation with the king will require more strategy and planning than just pure strength. Dragon has waited many years to take on Imu for a reason. He will not attack blindly and rely just on strength. He could have done it years before if he wanted. He has a carefully crafted plan to destroy the power source, the king of the chessboard, and that's where his role into the plot comes into play. Oda frequently draws parallels between One Piece and real-world politics or social structures. This scenario fits that pattern. It demonstrates that even if you defeat or remove a powerful leader, such as a king or president, the underlying system remains unaffected. Real change requires changing or destroying the entire structure of power, not just eliminating a single figure. Meanwhile, our Luffy's final battle, full of new abilities and dramatic events, will be against Blackbeard. This way we'll receive both, an epic personal fight and a large-scale war full of strategy, tactics, and tension, much like a real game of chess. Just think about it. Watching Luffy fight IMU and Blackbeard back-to-back with nearly the same attacks wouldn't be as epic as this scenario. And that's it for today. Comment below what you think about this theory, and if you want to learn more about IMU and her powers, click on this video right here. Thanks for watching, and bye!